Please listen to the disclaimer at the end of this podcast. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cafecito, the NA podcast, where we like to spend some time with members of the broader emerging manager community. My name is Gerson Guzman. The day job is managing partner at Saba Capital Partners. But it does feel like my second full-time job is all these various initiatives with the New America Alliance and doing whatever AJ asked me to do. But today, I'm very excited to spend some time with Gregg Walker, partner at Muller Monroe. And Gregg, welcome to the Cafecito.
Thank you for having me here.
All right. Well, listen, the concept behind Cafecito is just old friends having a conversation.
Yes.
I've gotten to know you over a couple years. Can't say we're close friends,
Yeah.
but we're getting to know each other. Just tell us a little bit about your background and your story. Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs, a little
Okay.
town called Bluebell, Pennsylvania. I was
Bluebell,
Pennsylvania. Okay. Born in Princeton, moved there when I was just about to turn 8 years old, I guess
Okay.
it is. And both my parents are from West Philadelphia, so it's a lot of Philadelphia roots.
West Philadelphia, born and raised. No,
Yes.
my little Will Smith impression there.
Yeah.
All right, so you grew up in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You went to Washington University in St. Louis.
That's right.
JD at Yale.
That's right.
But you never practiced law.
Never practiced
Okay.
law.
So how did the kid from Bluebell, Pennsylvania end up at Washington U in St. Louis?
I received a letter from Washington University when I was in my junior year in high school saying I looked like the type of candidate who might be able to earn a full scholarship at Washington University.
Okay.
I had actually never heard of the school, but my father was an HR guy and said, we actually hire a lot of people from that school. We view it as a really high quality institution.
Okay.
And I never was a person to turn down a free trip anywhere.
Amen.
So I took the trip to St. Louis, loved the campus, ended up eventually earning that full scholarship. It was an easy decision to make to go there. And, the rest is history. I ended up spending 2 terms as student body president. And as you said, ended up making my way to Yale for law school. So I don't regret that decision making.
Okay. Now, before we get to the law school conversation, you're still very active with Washington U.
Yes.
Been a donor. You've started a scholarship there.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because when you think about Yale and the Ivies, definitely a lot of endowments, and it's drilled into you to give back, but you don't see that kind of involvement at other universities. So what lit that spark, and how is it that you've continued to be involved as an alumnus of the university?
So as I mentioned, I attended Washington University on a full scholarship, and it always felt to me that I needed to give back some of the tremendous generosity that I received. So as soon as I graduated, I started being a donor at a very small level. Mm-hmm. When I started making a little bit of money, I started actually being a more serious donor, eventually endowed a scholarship that is called the Harlem Scholarship. I live in Harlem, and it's designed to first seek out students from Harlem to receive the scholarship. And it's called the Harlem Scholarship in honor of the Walker family. So I got my family's name in it somewhere. Awesome. But I've been very active. I've been on the Alumni Board of Governors. I've been active in the New York City area. I currently chair the finance network for the university in the alumni group. And what I found is it's been mutually beneficial. I've been able to help Washington University gather more donors, get its name out more and more in certain communities. But it's helped me a lot to connect with other alumni, learn from their experiences. So it's been a great partnership between myself personally, who had already benefited, and trying as I got older to give some of that back.
Oh, that's wonderful. And compliments of publicly available information. That endowed scholarship's now sitting at $150,000. So talk about making an impact.
Yes,
what's the profile of the students that are eligible for the scholarship, and how's the selection process for that?
Yes, it's any student in undergrad arts and sciences, and the selection process is first and foremost based on need. And then, like I said, they try to target someone who is from Harlem. And if there's no one from Harlem who's in need of that scholarship, then it's someone from Manhattan. There's almost always somebody who lives in Manhattan and who's appropriate for that scholarship.
That's awesome. Hey, great you're doing that. And look, I'm a scholarship beneficiary as well. I was able to go to college as a result of a scholarship, so it's great you're able to do that. All right, so let's talk about your law school career, or
Yeah.
rather your non-legal career. So you went to law school, but you
Yeah.
never practiced law.
That's right.
Okay.
By the time I got to law school, I really wanted to be an investment banker. I had geared my whole life since I was in junior high to wanting to be an M&A lawyer.
Okay.
And I grew up in the era of deals, what do you call them? Hostile deals.
Oh, hostile takeovers.
Yes,
Okay.
I grew up in the era of hostile takeovers, where lawyers would often play a big role in those dynamics.
Little Wall Street Martin Sheen action there.
That type
Yeah,
of thing,
yeah.
right? So I
Okay.
wanted to be that type of lawyer, and that era sort of started to die out. But more importantly, I realized a lot of what I thought was really cool about being an M&A lawyer was something that was really done by investment bankers, and that the lawyers who got to do that had been lawyers for 30 years and had done other things.
It wasn't some associate in the legal library, trying to look up in Westlaw.
That would have been me.
Yeah, that would have been you.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and that's not what I wanted to do. So I was fortunate in that when I was in law school, I got the opportunity to be a summer associate at Goldman Sachs during that second summer between second year of law school and third year of law school. My plan was that I'd be a lawyer for 2 or 3 years. It was a common path. In fact, when I was in law school, or just before I got to law school, both the guys who headed Goldman Sachs had been lawyers in their careers for a handful of years, and then had gone on and gone to the finance side. That was a well-worn path. But I was fortunate in 1994. Wall Street had a horrible year because interest rates were rising. 95 was a good year, but they didn't really hire anybody because they were still dealing with the shell shock of 94.
Right.
So I was applying to be a summer associate for the summer of 96, interviewing in December of 1995.
Oh, hot market.
Market was hot, and they didn't have any people. They hadn't hired anybody in 2 years.
Yeah.
People were collapsing of exhaustion in airports. It was crazy. So they said, we should hire some people from some law schools. So for a couple of years, from like 94, 95 through to 9/11, there was a lot of opening of the spigot for people who were law students to come through. I was one of those people who made his way to Wall Street during that era.
You were in Wall Street before the focus on work-life balance.
That's right.
Okay, and you were the beneficiary of dearth of capacity there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, you were in the telecom group, the TMT group?
That's where I ended up. I started in the merger department,
Okay.
which exclusively focused on merger and acquisition activity. At some point, in 2000, I moved over into what we would now call the TMT group.
Okay.
And they eventually eliminated the merger department. So I was sort of a merger expert in the TMT group, and that was a great place to be.
Okay. And then from Goldman, you went into entertainment, Viacom, Sony.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about that transition. How did you end up deciding to go into the in-house corp dev role?
Yeah.
And, this time you spent in-house.
I actually surprised myself. I first started interviewing for the Viacom role because a banker that I really, really respected at Goldman said, you should meet the guy who's in charge of all of that activity at Viacom. And I said, well, I certainly want to meet this person. But I didn't want to work in a big company, and I told him that. Eventually, I realized I did want that job. Viacom and CBS had just split. Everything I didn't like about big companies, the office politics, the bureaucracy, didn't exist. His department was just him and his assistant. And I was worried that because I had said so many negative things about how I didn't want the job and I'm just here to meet you and you and I should become friends. I had a beard back then, and he was the only investment banker I had ever met with a beard. And I was like, you and I have to be friends.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it was the perfect job. He was the perfect boss. I ended up spending 3 years there, and after 3 years there, going on to becoming head of corporate development for Sony.
Okay.
And all of that was the best career decision I ever made, was to leave Goldman, even though I went to those conversations specifically saying, there's no way I'm going to take this role.
That's funny. So it took me launching my own firm to actually have the confidence enough to grow the facial hair. The managing partner at my prior firm was a no facial hair guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He had a few side comments whenever anyone visited that had some facial hair.
So how many years is it that you've had the facial hair?
Oh, great question. I want to go with 18 months here. Yeah. It was all dark when it first started, but the emerging manager journey, gets the salt and pepper.
I can relate. Yes.
More salt than pepper at this point. But just bringing it back a little bit, in addition to the scholarships, you've been very involved in a lot of philanthropic organizations. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, your focus on making an impact across early education and working with folks in the correctional community is pretty impressive. And Cafecito is all about hearing the story that people haven't heard before. So
Yes.
tell us about that.
Well, and these experiences have taught me a lot. So in no particular order, I have been, for a period of time, I was the chairman of the board of the Harlem YMCA. Okay. YMCA is a great movement all across the world. The Harlem Y is special because there was a period of time when they were racially segregated, and Harlem Y was a place where black folks would live when they would move to the New York City area. It was one of the few places they knew they could find a place to get a bed and a hot meal. And that's a different era. But in the current era, it's a great place for families to have a safe place for their kids to have an athletic experience, learn about nutrition. And for adults, it's like a great gym. And so being the chairman there was great. We went from losing about $500,000 a year to having $500,000 of surplus during the period I was there. And we won this award called the Transformational Leadership Award that's given out by the overall New York City YMCA movement. And that award's only been given out twice, and we got it as one of the second time it was ever given out. And so I'm very proud of the leadership we established there. And there were a lot of people who've then taken that and made it even better. The Harlem Y is stronger now than when I was chair, but I'm still on the board. Great organization. Then DREAM, which used to be called Harlem RBI, is a youth education and sort of sports organization that started as a summer camp and an enrichment program, and now is a network of charter schools and is getting into the Head Start part of the child education template, and does amazing work, benefiting thousands of children, really transforming how the educational opportunities are in East Harlem and in sections of the Bronx. Big part of that concept is we throw away so many opportunities for youth when they're young if they're born impoverished. Yeah. That our system is kind of like, well, if you're born impoverished, you're not going to get a good education, and since you don't get a good education, you're not going to have any good opportunities to start a good career. DREAM is the best organization I've ever seen at intercepting that. It's saying, without investing in gobs of money, but with hiring the types of people who can break down that system, having 2 teachers in every classroom so they support each other and support the youth, we can actually give people the type of education that affluent kids get and have the expectations that we would generally have for affluent kids, where every child is expecting to go to college.
Assume they're going to do great things.
That's right. And that's a big, it's a big factor because low expectations in some ways can be one of the most insidious.
Self-fulfilling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that has been an organization where I've been on the board since 2002, and I ended up there just by luck. It was during the. You
look really young, by the way. You must have started this when you were 18, but go for it. Yeah.
But I joined there in that horrible recession in 2002. There was a search group that said, we can't do any more searches on Wall Street. There are no jobs on Wall Street. So what we're going to do is try to find Wall Street people roles in the not-for-profit sector on boards. So they said there's this one, it's in Harlem, and I live in Harlem, and it's all about baseball, and I'm a baseball fanatic. So I said, well, sign me up for that. I want to meet those people. And it's been the greatest thing ever to get connected to it.
So you were born, grew up in Bluebell. You live in Harlem, but I mean, you're doing so much for the community in Harlem. Are you just inspired by living in the neighborhood? Did you have roots back to Harlem? Like, where's that dedication?
No roots, but it is my home. I moved to Harlem in 1996 when I was still in law school, and I kind of reverse commuted to New Haven from there. And Harlem is the most famous black community in the world. And in some ways, maybe it's the most famous community in the whole world. It's a competitor. It has such a rich history, and it has such wonderful people, and it's been so good to me.
Over 3 decades, and it's just become home.
That's right. And I'm sure I'm sure you can relate. You know, you and I have talked about the fact that one of your sort of signature parts of your experience is coming to the United States when you're 6 years old. Right. For me, it's 1996 as an adult. Coming and being able to call Harlem my home is sort of creates all that dynamic and wanting to invest there and make it, my place.
Well, New York is such a transient city, right? People come and work for a couple years, or they come and study, and then they leave after a few years. You've really laid down roots in the community. That's wonderful. Back to the professional a bit. So you left entertainment, and if this were a game of 2 truths and a lie, I think folks would assume that what I'm about to say next is the lie. You ran a circus.
True.
Okay? A not a 3-ring circus, a 1-ring circus.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that and how that followed sort of your stint in, the corporate entertainment world.
Yes, I was CEO of the Big Apple Circus for a period right up prior to the pandemic.
Okay.
And it reminds me, there's an experience I had when I went from Goldman to Viacom, and then there's a hyper version of it when I became CEO of Big Apple Circus, which is realizing that there's a bit of an ivory tower dynamic that I had been infused with. And when I got to Viacom, it was so much more of like the real world where people would say, look, I have other things I do with my life other than work, which was not true at Goldman. And I could be making the millions of dollars people make at Goldman. I have this job because it allows me to live the rest of my life. So when I would go to people and say, look, we're not going to sleep for 2 weeks, but we're going to put together this great presentation for the CEO, people would say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And I'd never heard anybody at Goldman ever, relinquish an opportunity.
No analyst, no associate, no MD ever turned down the opportunity to not sleep for 2 weeks.
Exactly. Right, just the mindset didn't make sense. And then you get to the circus, it's a whole nother level of that because everybody had 2 or 3 jobs. The person who does the rigging for all the trapeze also puts up all the seats and then is in a couple of the acts. Everybody has 2 or 3 jobs. No one ever complains about how hard they work. They don't get paid very well, but they're like a family and they look out for each other. And you realize just how privileged you are to have been in all these other places where life comes so easy. But it helped me understand there's lots of imperfections in the real world, and succeeding in the real world is about maximizing the opportunity to create value despite the imperfections. Whereas I think in the ivory tower, it's a little easier to say, well, just get rid of all the imperfections. What are you guys doing? That's wrong. And being with real people, you get to see that it's making the flaws into advantages is that where the opportunity comes from. So it was a great experience, but I had never, I was getting liquor licenses. It's just on the ground, getting the workers' comp. All these things that when you're in the ivory tower, you say, well, somebody should just make sure that's taken care of. You're the guy who has to go take care of it, and you appreciate how complicated it is, how difficult it is. It's made me much better as a leader having that experience.
That's great. No, look, I think when you've gone to an Ivy League education, major investment bank, it's easy to say, well, plug in the assumption in Excel or put it in the presentation, and it should be easy to execute that.
Yes.
Right? But then being on the ground and having people execute that is a very different world.
Definitely.
So that's great. All right. So taking this entire experience set, you're now at Muller Monroe, which within the ecosystem of emerging managers is a well-known fund of funds that puts capital to work in emerging managers. How did that happen? I mean, you've got the pedigree, you've got the training, but how did you end up on the allocator side of the equation?
Really serendipity. So the pandemic was a terrible time. A lot of people died. It was painful in so many ways. It hurt the economy. I was one of the people for whom it had this really dramatic silver lining. I was in live entertainment, which went to zero with the pandemic. But everyone thought I had free time because I had been in live entertainment. There was no live entertainment. I was actually busier than ever, getting out of leases.
Oh, I know.
Terrible time.
We had an active portfolio, and it was just managing these companies through these very difficult decisions.
Yes. So busier than ever with the worst type of responsibilities. But I didn't want to disabuse people of the notion that I was available because I didn't know if live entertainment was ever coming back, and I wanted other opportunities. So as people would call and say, can you help me with my business? I would always say yes. So I probably had 8 different projects I was working on and burning the candle at both ends. But one of them was Andre Rice, the founder of Muller Monroe, said it would be good to be able to bounce ideas off you about our strategic growth plan.
Okay.
I was very happy to do it. Wasn't sure that I could add a lot when he first asked, but the answer was definitely going to be yes. I will definitely help you with that. And
for those that know Andre, when Andre asks, the answer is yes.
The answer should be yes anyway. Right. The answer should be yes, irrespective. And it was wonderful, and that opportunity would have never come in the absence of a pandemic, because his view was every worker, the company is Chicago-based, and I'm Harlem-based, as you discussed. His view was everyone needed to be in the office every day.
Andre's old school.
That's right. That's right. But the pandemic gave him a moment where no one was in the office to say, well, maybe since our biggest client is in New York, maybe it makes sense to have a guy who's New York based, and let's at least experiment with it. It's turned out, at least for me, to be a wonderful experiment that has worked well. And now we're coming up on 5 years since I became a partner, and it'll be 6 years soon since I started that consulting work that I did. And that's how I ended up on the allocator side. I love the role. You've talked about the work that I do in Harlem and my commitment to my community. Mullen Monroe is the perfect intersection of all the hopes and dreams of a kid like me, growing up, because what I do is primarily allocate funds to lower middle market private equity firms. 75% of the dollars that have been invested over the course of the history of Mullen Monroe have gone to firms led by women and or people of color. And by led, we're talking about 30% ownership. And it's also coaching and helping those organizations be more successful. So I'm a finance person who's delivering the best possible returns for pensioners from our clients, who's also helping our ecosystem have more women, more people of color get a chance to lead in this area. So I'm very grateful that I've been able to be a part of it. They already had a great history before I got there, but I feel like then I've had a chance to build on that and create some new opportunities.
That's wonderful. Now, I think, because as an emerging manager, I've had the tin cup out when asking for capital.
Yeah.
It's easy to look at the quantitative elements of someone's background, but you're making a lot of decisions on the qualitative aspects. And we talked a little bit about this, like the sustainability of a partnership. How well are folks going to get along? Talk to us a little bit about that for the emerging managers that are in our community thinking about raising a fund, selecting a potential partner or partnering with someone, and how is that dynamic viewed by an allocator?
It ends up being one of the most important things we analyze is who are the partners, what are the qualities that they bring, are they complementary, but above all else, are they likely to hang together and be strong? One of the best ways to lose money is to have a partnership where the partners get a divorce from each other and you kind of have a fund that no one's leading. Sometimes you can imagine two individuals who really enjoy working together, might have even had offices next to each other at a big shop, hang out, their spouses, their children might get along really well, but they've never run a business together.
The pressures of running a business together.
Totally different. Right. And have they ever had to disagree over something really serious? How do they break ties between the two of them, or it could be three of them? How do they get through that? Have they ever hired people together? Have they ever gotten office space together? Have they fired people? How do they decide on that? Set bonuses, these are things often they haven't done. They've just invested together. Right. So a lot of people think in our role, it's all about finding great investors. Unfortunately, that's table stakes. You have to be a good investor to even be in this conversation. Then you have to demonstrate that you can raise money, that you can do all the things that I mentioned before, and that you can do it in coordination with your partners in a way that works. We hire an industrial psychologist to interview every set of partners that we consider investing with. Partly it's to do a double check on everything we think we see. But what's great about someone who is an industrial psychologist who for a living analyzes the interplay between leaders is sometimes they will see things we don't see. There was a case of a group where there were two top people. One was really first out of equals from our perspective. Okay. The industrial psychologist said the person you think is second out of equals thinks she is first out of equals. And at some point, that's going to be a problem. She's not going to tolerate being second. And I'm worried this partnership will fall apart. We went back, re-underwrote the whole situation. Okay. What would happen if they had a divorce? And assuming that the person we thought was number one was going to remain, would we still want to underwrite it? We decided the answer was yes. We even talked to them about this concern we had. They ended up getting a divorce a couple of years later, and the business is still thriving. Wow. But it's exactly the type of thing that we're looking for. We're so good at it now that we rarely find the industrial psychologist finds things we didn't already see, but we still want to make sure there's a full-time professional who does all that analysis and interviews all the top people at the firm, because we think it's as important as anything else in this decision-making process.
That's great. You guys have built that into your process. I know in our business, we invest in founder-led, owned and operated businesses, sometimes bringing in new management and trying to figure out, are these folks going to be able to work together? Yeah. And what happens if they don't? And how do you make those hard decisions, right? And you're doing it you're making commitments to partnerships. What, it's a 10-year vehicle?
At least, right?
Right?
Really, it's really a 12-year vehicle usually. You're doing a 10-year commitment plus 2 one-year extensions that are sort of built in. So the same way you're looking at a company where you could always sort of pull the ripcord and say, you know what, let's just get out of here. We're stuck for 12 years with any commitment we make. So everything you're analyzing, we're thinking the same things, but it's even more important that we get it right.
Wow. Well, this is Emerging Manager Week in New York. The Bureau of Asset Management's having an event tomorrow. The Comptroller's Office is having an event at the end of the week. They always make sure we all kind of have great Valentine's Day plans with our loved ones. So it being Emerging Manager Week, what advice do you give to a first-time fund, folks that are going out there and trying to get to a first closing? And someone comes to you and says, "Hey, thinking about doing this. Give me your thoughts on what are the pitfalls that we should avoid?"
Yes, I would want to hear your advice to people. Your advice is going to be more valuable. I would say
don't do it.
Be sure you're fully committed. Right. I would say first and foremost, realize you're going to get a lot of no's. So I think people have to be resilient, and their expectations have to be. It can be a long, painful process.
The highs and the lows, man.
That's right. And make sure that you are ready for that long haul. That there's an interesting sort of self-fulfilling dynamic to it. That firms that look like they're going to be able to stand the test of time tend to make it through to the end successful. One of the biggest negatives is if it looks like people are doing this as an experiment, and if it's really painful after 6 months, they'll go back to their high-paying jobs that they could just do something else that's easier. Or as I've already described, the partners aren't really wedded to each other. They kind of just met. It's a marriage of convenience. Maybe this will work. But very quickly, if it's not working, maybe we'll just go back
to something else.
We'll try the next thing. So I think it's key. It's self-fulfilling. Once you have an anchor investor and you've done some deals together, and it's clear you know how to do good deals together, and you're going to be together, win or lose, I think the psychology of the allocator shifts to what's the risk that I get left out of investing with this great group, versus in the early going, it can feel almost like people are thinking they're doing you a favor by being in your first close.
Right.
And I'm doing a favor by being in the first close doesn't work very well in successfully getting.
I wish
to
I had
first
more
close.
of those friends, by the way, just to be clear. But no, I fully agree. It's getting that partnership dynamic right, being able to demonstrate that you have staying power is so important. I know early on my partner and I got those questions like, but are you really going to do this? And we think that question's been asked and answered. Gregg, we're coming towards the end. These cafecitos, they flow by so fast, but we always like to bring it to a close with something a little bit more fun.
Okay.
Talk to us about a book that you've read recently and takeaways, and maybe tie that to either what we've talked about in the cafecito or a life lesson.
One of the most recent books I read is the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson.
Okay.
And it's fascinating in a million different ways. We all have an iPhone in our pocket, or almost all of us. And we've watched Apple emerge, but it's amazing just in the weeds, all the things that went into it, all the little twists and turns. One of the stories that I found fascinating that I sent a note to Andre, the founder of Mullen Monroe, as soon as I saw it, I said, Woz, the first time they do a deal together, maybe it's the second time they do a deal together, Woz gets his money stolen by Steve Jobs. And I say it's extraordinary to think that two very young men working together, the first time they do something together, a guy pulls a gun on them and they decide to drop that business. The second time, Steve Jobs steals his money. And I feel like if I were Woz, I'd have been like, you know what, 2 strikes, I'm out. It's sort of the fool me once.
Fool me once,
But Woz's mindset, I think, is something that we can all learn from. There's a pragmatism in saying, what am I really here to do? What am I trying to accomplish? Is it that I am going to stand on ceremony and have this very didactic sort of view of what I want from a partner, and if those boxes aren't checked, then he's fired as a partner? Or is it this more pragmatic thing? I know myself, I know what I'm good at. I see this other person, we're complementary, but I also know his flaws. And I'm going to continue to experiment with what we can create together that's better than what we can create individually. We all know it kind of works out very well because we end up with Apple. But I think Woz doesn't get enough credit because I had never heard that story before, not just for the role he plays in the building of Apple, because I think that's sort of easy to sort of diagnose, but to realize the psychology of a person who has his ego in check, is willing to give other people grace, and is willing to sort of invest his life in trying to create something better for other people. Right. So the book's about Steve Jobs, but what I really got from it was sort of his first partner, and how his first partner maybe can teach us all a little bit of a lesson about how to decide, what do you want out of your life, and how are you going to invest, and not necessarily have a list of things you're demanding that is inflexible.
Right. Well, and back to the discussion on partnership, it's being able to see in each other what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your faults are, and knowing that you're both coming to the table with your real self and trying to build something greater together.
Exactly.
So with that, Gregg, thank you very much for joining us in this Cafecito. And to our audience, thank you for listening in. Please tune in and check out all the episodes. This has been a great journey, and we look forward to seeing you at the next NAA event. Hasta luego.
Thank you.
This podcast should not be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced in whole or in part. The information contained in this podcast does not constitute a recommendation from the New America Alliance, the host, or guests to any listener. The terms NAA or New American Alliance may refer to any one or more entities associated with the NAA. Neither the NAA, host, or guests, nor any of their respective affiliates or employers make any representation or warranty as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or any information contained in this podcast.